positive story of production agriculture. And that has been the mission of Trent since he walked into a radio station in Spearfish, South Dakota in 2000 and asked to have his own program. Often touted as an agricultural activist, that dream of a sixth-generation United States farmer came true on January 8, 2001, when Loos Tales first aired on KMZU in Missouri. Today, 3 million listeners on nearly 100 radio stations in 21 states hear the show every day, along with online listeners worldwide. In addition to Loos Tales, Trent hosts and produces Rural Route Radio and Dakota Trails and Tales, which are available on numerous radio outlets and loostalesmedia.com. Trent on the Loos is broadcast daily on BEK.TV in North Dakota and available online at BEK.news. Trent hosts Across the Pond each morning on BEK.TV media platforms, Rumble and Twitter, which guests from around the world listen to. In 2024, he started Wing and Prayer, a weekly hour of exploration into biblical exploration. Trent travels the globe to unearth stories about the people involved in the many different facets of production agriculture and to ignite the passion for the story of food and the people who raise it. Trent has shared his message in 48 different states, Japan, Australia, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Canada, with great enthusiasm for an industry he truly believes in. He encourages producers to stand up and proudly tell consumers about life on their family farming operations. Trent has been an outspoken advocate against the 30 by 30 and other efforts to infringe on constitutional and property rights. He and his wife Kelly have 3 daughters, Libby, Lindsay, and Landry. Their family adventures typically revolve around animals and sports. Their latest endeavor is a foray into the retail meat business with home-raised products marketed through the Purple Ribbon Network. Please join me in welcoming our final speaker, Trent Loos.
If that was any longer, it'd be longer than I'm going to speak. I thought that Ernie did a good job down here, so I see no point in getting up there and being elevated. And thank you for hanging around. You too, Seth. Did you bring backups, reinforcements? Outstanding, awesome. So it's been, I don't know why I'm cutting out once in a while, it's been quite a ride for 25 years. I've just been thinking a lot about the 25 years that I've been trying to tell our story, and I think the title of this got left out of that introduction. I don't know which one of you two wrote that, but, oh, Blake. What was the title of this presentation, Blake?
Domestic food and fuel for our freedom.
Hey, that's really good. Round of applause for Blake. Blake lost last night. The funny thing is that when I started doing radio, and by the way, if you listen to all the TV and radio, and I spend 3 to 4 hours a day doing broadcasts, trying to keep up with Rhonda, but I'm not there yet. People always come up and they say, they introduce you as a 6th generation rancher, and we know that you have cattle, you have horses, and you have sows. How big can your ranch actually be? So I fess up and just tell the truth always. It's just as big as my wife can handle. And where am I today? Clay County, Iowa. Where is she today? Dealing with frozen waters and a sow that got out of a crate overnight and all of those other things. And so I just fess up and I tell everybody, I'm just a rancher's husband. That's what I am. But it's about the family, and I don't see Eli in here. Eli Harmon, did you have to go back to school? Oh, there you are. Why do you have that blue jacket off again, Eli? We just did a TV program that Quentin and Eli were on, and the best part of that program, I'm sorry, Quentin and Jeff, if Jeff's in here, there's Jeff right there. So I had Quentin, Eli, and Jeff, those two are talking about the Iowa farmer feeder that doesn't get enough respect in the entire cattle business. And then my last question was for Eli. And I said, Eli, now, with all these things going on and all of your family's involved in feeding cattle, are you excited about the future of agriculture? And you responded,
very excited and for the opportunity.
And that's why we're here. To inspire 15-year-olds to follow in our footsteps. And what's most interesting about Eli is he's second generation. You know, we talk and we often brag about Larry. We were bright. Larry's 90. I can't believe it. Larry's 90. Eli's 15. Think this is what you got to look forward to when you're 90. We got like 7 generations sitting over here. And my family came from Germany to Quincy, Illinois in 1839. And we've been taking care of land and livestock ever since. And I wonder, do we do enough to encourage new people to get into the business? Because that's really what we need to do. You know, how many people farm in the United States? USDA's got a number, and you got a number that you're wanting to shout out, but you're afraid to. What's the percentage of the United States that farms? 1 to 2%, right? That's what everybody says. What does the USDA say that the number of farmers are? No, they have a specific number, 2.1 million. How does the USDA define a farmer? Anyone who has $1,000 in gross sales from their location in a given year is considered a farmer by the USDA. That means that students with grow lamps in their dorm room in Iowa City, University of Iowa, selling things out of there, qualify as a farmer. And that's not even the ag school. Although they do have a big old farmer emblem right on their football jersey every time. But my moral of my story is, how many people are actually involved in agriculture? Do you know? The Farm Foundations, a few years ago, did a study, and they came up with the fact that there were 180,000 farm families that produce 80% of the food. Think about that number. How many people in the United States? 330 million. And you have 180,000 farm families producing 80% of the food? So what's the moral of that story?
You need a nap.
We need a nap. I'm guessing that's what my wife's saying right now. We need a nap. Not many people know where their food really comes from. And the reason that I included fuel in that story, and I didn't talk a lot about fuel in the first 10 years, but there is a huge component of fuel that needs to be brought into the equation. Larry, I'm going to put you on the spot. I gave you this answer this morning. 1 gallon of diesel fuel replaced how many man-hours of food labor production? $500. 1 gallon of diesel fuel replaced 500 hours of food labor production. That means you don't have to hoe the row like we used to. You can put the diesel in the tractor and go to work and get the job done. And in 1900, we didn't have tractors. So how many acres of land did it take to produce enough food to feed one person per year in 1900? Any bankers in the room? They probably know the answer to this. They're good with numbers, right? Oh, there happens to be one right here, Seth. How many acres of land did it take to produce enough food to feed one person in 1900? 10. Very good guess, though, at 40. That's good. Nobody's ever been that close. The interesting thing about the 10 is that it took 5 acres to produce food to feed the people. But how many tractors did we have in 1900? 0. So what did we use to produce the food to feed the people in 1900? Horses and mules. Guess how many acres it takes to feed a horse and a mule for a year? 5. So if you ever wanted to know how much you eat the exact same amount as a mule in a given year. 5 acres worth of food. That was in 1900. What's the answer in 2024? How many acres of land does it take to produce enough food to feed one person in 2024? Seth?
1.
Close. 1/3 of an acre. So how did we get from 10 to 1/3 of an acre? There's not one answer. What are those answers? Well, one I already gave you. Diesel fuel. There's probably nothing bigger than diesel fuel. And I was speaking to a group the other day, happened to be in Fargo, and I asked them, what was the biggest accomplishment in American agriculture since we created it, since 1862? A lot of things happened about agriculture in 1862. The Morrill Act, the Homestead Act, there's so many things that enabled agriculture to be what it is today. But nothing is bigger than diesel fuel. What are the other things that contributed to going from 10 acres of land to 1/3 of an acre of land? I want to hear what you think. What are the other advancements that made a huge difference?
Genetics.
Machinery. Now you don't even need to drive the damn thing. I was interviewing a guy from South Dakota, and he said his dad got in a tractor, and he'd never been in a tractor with auto steer. He's 82 years old. He called him up after 2 hours because he hadn't heard from him. He said, "Dad, how's it going?" He said, "I don't know. I've been in here for 2 hours. I haven't done anything." Machinery and auto steer and things like that. What are the other advancements? What?
Electricity.
Electricity. Think about electricity. What do you not have without electricity? Well, how about indoor plumbing? That's like top of the list, right? What else don't you have without electricity? Running water. I just listened to this 50-minute documentary about the early pioneers of McKenzie County, North Dakota. And you guys think it's cold. How many of you woke up this morning freezing to death in your house? Nobody. And the temperatures in Spencer, Iowa this morning was 15 below, 32 degrees below zero wind chill. In this documentary, in Watford City, North Dakota, in 1892, a guy put a thermometer on the inside of his house one day in January. Anybody want to guess what the temperature was on the inside of his house when he woke up that morning? 4 below zero on the inside of the house. He didn't have a wind chill, there was no wind. 4 below zero in the house with a dirt floor and snakes. Well, there might have been a lot of snakes when it was 4 below. That's good news. You never have snakes in your house when it's 4 below. I also talked to people who in the 30s went outside hoping that there would be a dandelion that had popped up so they had something to eat that day. Think about, have you ever taken the time to just go back and find some pictures of Clay County, Iowa in 1900? Do you know what wasn't in these pictures? Plants, trees, and growth like we see today. It's a barren place. And if you look at a real picture of 1900, and yet today, every single day, I have somebody telling me, or I'm reading an article, or somebody has told me about how farmers are destroying the planet. Because you have cows that generate methane. Or even worse yet, you have an ethanol plant that's emitting CO2. So we got to stop that CO2 from going into the atmosphere. We got to compress it, put it in a pipeline at 2200 psi, send it off to North Dakota to bury it, which is the stupidest thing mankind ever came up with. And nothing I've spent fighting more in the last 4 years than that concept itself. Because why? Why are we supposedly doing that? Because greenhouse gases are destroying the planet as we know it. There are 4 greenhouse gases constantly targeted. What are those 4 greenhouse gases? CO2, 1. Methane, 2. What? We did CO2 already. 2 more.
Water vapor.
Water vapor, no. Nitrous oxide, sulfur oxide. The Earth's atmosphere is 78% nitrous oxide. When you sweat, you live healthier. Why do you live healthier? Because the nitrous oxide in the atmosphere gets into your sweat globules, and then it gets into your system, and you increase your nitric oxide intake. The reason people who live theoretically sweat live longer is they get more nitric oxide. We don't understand bacteria. You want proof of how smart the horse is compared to us? We try to cleanse ourselves we take a shower every day with soap. How stupid is that? When you wash a horse, how many of you rinsed the horse off? Or this could be your dog, either one, okay? The dog or the horse. When you go give them a bath, what's the first thing they do when you turn them loose? Roll in the dirt. Why? They're trying to re-inoculate with all the bacteria that you just washed off down the drain. That's crazy talk right there. So that comes back to nitric oxide, sulfur oxide, methane, and CO2. CO2 is in the atmosphere at what percentage? 0.043%, or 430 parts per million. If you go into a greenhouse, what do they have the atmosphere CO2 at for benefit of plant growth? Between 700 and 1200 parts per million, or 0.07 or 1.012. So why is 0.043 too much in the atmosphere if we put 700 parts per million in a greenhouse? So apparently CO2 is important for growing plants. That's maybe the moral of the story. Because it contributes to fueling photosynthesis. The more CO2 that the plant has, you ready for this? The less water the plant needs to grow and function. Do we have an abundance of water today? We do? Well, on the earth, but where that water is at is the discussion. Because look at California. I love Ernie's love for California. I don't know how many of you hear Ernie Gospel, but he despises California, you can tell. But here's how smart they are. Pacific Palisades, completely destroyed by fire. They don't have water to put the fire out. And if you look to the west, there's more water than you could ever get a hold of, called the Pacific Ocean. Meanwhile, they let these houses all burn up. That's the logic and the common sense we're dealing with. All right, back to my greenhouse gases. I got to finish this one before I distract myself again. CO2 is apparently plant food. What's methane? What's methane's purpose? Why did God put methane in the atmosphere and in the cycle? Methane does what? Plant growth. How does it do plant growth? 93% of natural gas that generates your synthetic nitrogen fertilizer is methane. So apparently methane is also responsible for plant growth. What's nitric oxide generate? Nitrogen. What's nitrogen's role in growing crops? It fertilizes and plants. It's food for plants. So 3 of the 4 are food for plants. What was the 4th one we said? Sulfur oxide. What's sulfur oxide do? Fertilizer. 4 of the 4 are fertilizer. I got a great sulfur oxide story. Not this past summer, but the summer before. Do you remember there was a train that derailed in Montana and 17 cars ended up in the Yellowstone River? Just so happened that my wife and I had a 30-year wedding anniversary, and I said, honey, want to go to Montana for the wedding anniversary? Sure. I failed to mention to her that there was an EPA listening session in Columbus, Montana that I wanted to be at, so that worked out really good. So we go to this EPA listening session, and I'm sitting here listening, and the lady says, now, 3 of these rail cars have molten sulfur in them, and they're in the Yellowstone River. But we brought from DC one of our scientists with us to explain to you that those of you downstream from this train derailment should have no concern for your drinking water, because Columbus and Billings and all the towns between Columbus and Billings get water out of the Yellowstone River to drink. So this scientist comes down and he says, we've looked at this, and this molten sulfur is really not a problem. The issue is that you just can't get enough sulfur to be a problem, and you just don't need to worry about the sulfur in your drinking water. So you don't take my question until after the fact. I walk up to him. I said, sir, are you sure that sulfur in the drinking water is not a problem? Oh yeah, no, we looked at this, and this is not an issue. I said, so then why in 1997 did the EPA put regulations on the amount of sulfur that could be in the emissions? In fact, in 1997, they started targeting coal-fired power plants to put in scrubbers, because the sulfur emissions were contributing to a problem. And then to make things even worse, in 2006, the Bush administration required that all diesel be of a low sulfur value so that the sulfur didn't get into the atmosphere. If sulfur's not a problem in the drinking water, why do we do all that with the EPA? Well, that's because of acid rain. Wait a minute. If the sulfur is in the river and the water's flowing through the sulfur and it goes into the drinking water, that's not a problem. But if the rain comes through the sulfur in the atmosphere and comes to Earth, it's a risk. And his answer was priceless. You guys out west just think different than we do. Yeah, we do. We're like 2 and 2 is 4. And now here's the rest of the story. Is there anybody in here who doesn't put sulfur in their fertilizer mixes today when you didn't have to do it in 1995? Nobody. We've eliminated plant food at every turn. Methane, CO2, nitrous oxide, sulfur oxide. And this is how foolish we are. What do they call those gases that are dangerous and going to kill us? What do they call them? Greenhouse gases. Why do we grow plants in a greenhouse? It's the best way to protect them. To protect them from the elements, to make sure that they have the ideal amount of nutrition, all of these things. And yet, everyone has fallen prey to greenhouse gases are bad. In fact, I'm now starting a campaign. I need more greenhouse gases. That's the moral of the story. We've blatantly been lied to. And just look at nutrition. The egg, right now. You know, Ernie mentioned this morning the eggs are $7. Last week, the wholesale price of eggs, and we happen to be standing in the #1 egg producing state in the nation, proudly. What was the wholesale price for eggs last week? Anybody know? $7.34. Why? Why are eggs $7.34 wholesale? Oh, you all been told why. Why is it? Bird flu, H5N1, avian influenza. How many birds have they euthanized since October 2022 because of H5N1? Anybody know? 150 million. What's the protocol? Bird test positive at the farm or in the state lab with a PCR test for avian influenza. 2 days later, they send another sample to Ames, to the USDA lab. They do an ELISA test. 3 to 5 days later, they get the lab report back to the farm. If it's positive, what's the USDA come in and do? Kill every one of them. If it's 1 day away from their schedule to go to the Tyson, let's say it's a turkey plant, and go to the Tyson turkey plant in Storm Lake, I think it's in Storm Lake, you can't, they gotta be euthanized and go to landfill. Can't eat them. Can't segregate the sick ones and try to develop a little natural immunity to do things that we know we're supposed to do in terms of exposure through natural immunity. Can't do any of that. We got to euthanize 150 million. But I got a question. If I were to tell you, how many of you bought chicken lately? Any chicken consumers in this audience? No. Oh, Alan has. If we have one person who's willing to tell the truth. The rest of you are like, I don't eat anything narrower between the eyes than I am. 2/3 of the chickens that have been euthanized since October 2022 have been broilers. 1/3 have been layers. Why are the chicken meat prices the same as they were 6 months ago and a year ago? Is that an accurate statement? Are you still paying what you were paying for thighs and breast?
My wife bought it, I don't know.
Well, the 2 women behind you are saying that's a true story. What would we do without women? I guess if Biden would have got reelected, we'd find out. But anyway, by the way, anybody who tried to give that guy a penny for his thoughts, he got change. Now we don't have a penny, so we can't even give him a penny for his thoughts. So where was I going with that? Why have the price of chicken not changed? And we only euthanized one, we've still euthanized a lot of layers, don't get me wrong, but 1/3 of the birds we've euthanized have been layers, and egg prices are through the roof. There's another component that nobody's talking about. 10 states in the last 2 years have had mandates through state initiatives to mandate cage-free egg-laying facilities. Why do we put chickens in a cage? Same reason we put plants in a greenhouse, to protect them. Because chickens are not kind little critters. They don't even know where the term pecking order came from. Everybody talks about the pecking order. They don't know that the pecking order came from a hen who didn't like another hen and pecked it to death. That's a true story. So you put 5 chickens in a cage and you decrease the number of chickens that peck each other to death. And now the mortality of the chickens laying hens in cage-free environments is tripled. Because 10 states, Colorado, Michigan were the last 2, 10 states have now mandated that we have cage-free environments. They don't even know what that means. It just means the chicken's not in jail to them. Why did we, in the 1950s, we started, everybody in here, when they're kids, including me, my grandfather was born in 1918, my dad was born in 1941, I was born in 1966, and as a kid, some of my best days were going with Grandpa to town, peddling eggs. We'd peddle eggs. Everybody had chickens. Everybody had a few eggs. We didn't have layers and broilers. You let the chicken lay its eggs until it got done laying its eggs, and you butchered it and you ate it, including chicken feet soup. If you haven't had chicken feet soup, you're not old enough in agriculture. You go home and have some chicken feet soup. And what happened in the 50s as we started consolidating the chicken and poultry business? I should include turkeys, it's the same thing. What did the USDA come out and say? USDA, I can find you the exact quotes. USDA in the 50s said, as we continue to increase the size of the chicken flocks and farms all across this country, we need to move all of those chickens indoors to protect them from disease. So then I asked the question today. How is it that these chickens that we know are in barns are getting sick from H5N1 on birds that are flying from Mexico to Canada for summer? How's that happen? Because we know that the transmission only occurs through saliva or fecal material. Are those migratory birds stopping in, kissing the other chickens through the screens? What's going on with that? It makes no sense whatsoever. I know that we have had some migratory birds dead, and you see some of those, but if we have 150 million chickens, turkeys, and now a few ducks, wouldn't the migratory birds all be dead? How are they surviving? These are questions that got to be answered, that nobody's asking the question. And then you brought up the real issue. You brought it up. It's your fault. I'm giving you credit. Not always. Okay, most of the time it is. You are in the MISO district for electricity, correct? Everybody, yeah, well, I'm Southwest Power Pool. MISO runs from North Dakota, Minnesota, then straight down to Louisiana. Did you know that as they were looking at the weather forecast for this winter and saw that in February we were going to have an Arctic blast, they are estimating that the MISO electric grid is not strong enough to withstand the demands that are coming. I woke up this morning, I'm like, I can get back to Southwest Power Pool tomorrow. We still have electricity today. We're this close to going dark. And nobody's talking about that either. Last week, for whatever reason, the Tennessee Valley Electricity Co-op is supposed to be the most stable, steady co-op. I'm on the Custer Public Power District within the Southwest Power Pool, and my guy Rick Nelson tells me that Tennessee is the one that everybody wants to be like. Last week, 3 radiation-generated electricity, nuclear facilities all went down the same night. 3 of them producing electricity. Why? We are this close to being inadequate on electricity to meet the demand. This morning, I got a note from Nebraska Public Power because I'm on their list. I get a note every morning on where our resources are at. Whether we are told to conserve, we got a note this morning. Obviously, it was within reason that you should conserve electricity because we're going to have a higher demand than what we have a supply. There were 3 days last summer in the heat, the Southwest Power Pool, and I chewed them out. Not that they care that I chewed them out, I felt better about it. 3 days in a row, there was 5,000 megawatt demand of electricity higher than what the supply was. And they were so proud. They got through that without a blackout. I'm like, that was the stupidest thing you could have done. If you had 3 days of no electricity, for the majority of the people, they would wake up and say, what's causing this? I'll tell you what's causing this. We are subsidizing wind and solar to the point where we're shutting down coal and natural gas. And coal and natural gas are the two supplies of reliable, affordable electricity. I say nothing negative about nuclear, but I know for a fact we had an infrastructure for coal and natural gas that would keep us in electricity to meet what the whole electric co-op started in the 30s. And we have an infrastructure that made it work. And now we're just sitting back and letting it go down. And I'm just going to ask you a question. Global coal consumption last year, knowing that from 2008 to 2025, we went from 60% of our electricity generated by coal to where we are today at 22%. So we went from 60% generating electricity coal to 22% of our electricity generated by coal. So globally, is the use of coal for 2024 higher or lower? Why do you say higher? Why are you so informed over here in this section? China is permitting 2 coal-fired power plants a week. They're not building 2, they're permitting 2 a week. And India is also trying to keep pace. So we're now exporting our coal to China and India. Why? There's no logic behind any of this. I am more concerned about our electric grid than any other aspect of what is taking place. And it's high time that we get back to how can we in communities identify energy sources and provide these energy sources, because without electricity, you're going to have to go outside for a lot of things. And that's putting it politely. We have just got to act on this now. Ernie walked through it. He showed the 36 trillion in debt. I encourage everybody every morning to do what I do. I didn't mean to be like Trent, but Becky, you can go to usdebtclock.org. That way, you and your banker, Ryan, will know how much you owe the federal government today. Anybody want to do that right now? I'm going to tell you it's about $107,000. U.S. debt clock. Eli, quit looking around. You're the youngest guy in the room. Get it done. Get on your phone. Go to U.S. debt. Do you have a phone with you?
Get your phone out.
Do you have a phone? Well, I was going to make you go get it. You're a 15-year-old in here without a phone. Shit. usdebtclock.org. Come on, Eli. It's taking you too long. Aren't you 15? Are you busy feeding cattle instead of talking on your phone? Or you're 17? I'm sorry. What's it say? Debt per person, $107,000? Well, it's not exactly 107. What's the number, Eli? Oh, you just pandered to me to get me to say that I was right. Come on, Eli, we need the number. Somebody's got to pull the number because I'm stuck. We're not moving without this, Blake.
107-239.
Thank you. Oh my God, we got it from an extension person. And we all give crap to the extension people for being behind. 107-239, is that what you said?
Yep.
That's what everyone in this room owes the federal government right now. Every child born right now owes the federal government $107,239. I speak in the York High School, York, Nebraska, twice a year. At the beginning of the year and then in February. And at the beginning of the year, at York High School, even though York, Nebraska is like the little breadbasket of Nebraska, it's the highest farmland, it's the most irrigated acres, it produces more per county than any other county in Nebraska in terms of corn and soybeans. They have an FFA program that is absolutely second to none. And Jason Hirschfield has been the teacher there for quite a while, and Jason has just put together every kid in their FFA or their ag class, whether they're an FFA or not, every kid in their ag classes, which is now 180, they have 3 teachers. As an animal in the shop that they have to go take care of before they go home at school every day. Absolutely incredible. So they asked me to come and speak to these kids twice a year. And 80% of them are not farm kids. They live in town, but it's become the cool thing to do to be in the ag classes at York High School. And so in my August opportunity to speak to these kids, subsidies were heavy on my mind. So it's like, how many of you in here are in favor of subsidies? Every kid but 2 raised their hand. Why? So I went around the room, and they had the standard answers that everybody would have. Well, I want to help people that need help, and this and that and another thing. And Eli, I did that same thing I did to you. I said, somebody get out your phone. And Mr. Herschel was looking at me because he just told him, put your phone away and don't look at your phone. I said, somebody get out your phone and go to us.org and tell me what that says, the average, what we all owe the federal government today. And at that time, it was $105,800 something. I said, and I walked through why these subsidies have led us to the point where every one of you owe the federal government $106,000 today. I spent like 5 minutes on it. And then I said, so I want to re-ask you this question before we leave this topic. How many of you still think subsidies are a good thing, and when are you going to write your check to the federal government for $106,000? 2 young ladies still did raise their hand and say subsidies are a good thing. Everybody else is like, no, we don't want subsidies anymore. Nobody's ever explained it to them like that. They didn't even know really what a subsidy was. And we take them. And there are some of you in here that take them. And I know why you take them. Because if you don't take them, your neighbor's going to get them, and then you're not going to have the opportunity to pass the farm on to the next generation. That has to stop. We cannot continue to do that. But let's look at the big picture. The big picture is the United States farmer is so good at growing corn. I mean, we grow corn like nobody else in the world. I don't think I should say this. How many kids? Oh, yeah, there's too many. All right. Farmers would rather grow corn and do a lot of things, okay? I'll let you just let your imagination run with what I might say with the rest of that story. But what'd you get for your corn crop in 1987? So that's what was corn worth in 1987. Time out. Time out. You were 5 in 1987. Are you a banker? Do you study trends in agriculture and know how these things all affect each other? So you've never studied 1987 in corn prices? Where you know where I'm going with Ryan? You want to show him up right here? What were corn prices in 1987?
Oh, about $1.75.
Are you sure?
No.
Who sold Larry? What was corn prices in 1987? Larry, what was corn prices in 1987? 88 was a drought, so, I think they were $3.25. What are you getting today? What's corn price today? $4.74. It's 1987, 40 years later. What'd you pay for nitrogen in 1987? I can tell you, you paid 587% less than you're paying this year. What'd you pay for your pickup in 1987? I bought a new pickup in 1987 and paid $10,000 for it. What'd you pay for a bag of seed corn in 1987? $78. I'd buy that number. What'd you pay this year?
$278.
300 plus. You paid 78 again this year?
$278.
Oh, you cheapskate. That's the worst corn you can possibly buy. What brand was that?
I'm the dealer. Discount.
For $50, I'll let you give out your number right now. Okay, I don't need to go on. Everybody knows the moral of this story, right? Inflation has occurred at every input. Oh, what'd you pay in property tax in 1987? What do you pay today?
A lot.
Way higher. You know, our property, we bought our place, Kelly and I bought our place, a section in 2006. We paid 350% more today than we paid in 2006. And we don't have any tillable land. It's all grazing and a house that is not worth much, according to the government, which is good. All of these inputs, I actually have now believed that property tax is a means of eliminating our ability to own land, so that only the wealthy will be able to afford it. That's what I believe today. And if we don't get a handle on the property tax problem, we're not going to own the land. We'll be peasants on the land, which, by the way, happened before in the Bolshevik Revolution. But the moral of my story is still true. All of your inputs have gone from here to here, and corn prices are still here. How do we fix that? I don't know. Each one of you are going to have to answer that question yourself. Here's what I do know. That we continue to fight over whether ethanol is important, or livestock is important, or exporting corn is important. As long as we continue to fight internally about all these things, we're never going to win. I happen to think that ethanol is important, that livestock feeding is important, that exporting 22% of the corn, if we have it left over after those two things, is important, that 7% of the industrial uses is important. All of those things are important. We continue to grow them. But what I see happening right now, particularly with this CO2 thing, is that you have foreign countries who have figured out they want to control the energy business in the United States, and so they're luring the ethanol plants into things that they can't afford to be a part of long term. And I go to a gas station every single time. And I look, I've just been monitoring it since January 1. Every single gas station that I've stopped at, the difference between ethanol and non-ethanol, what is it? Per gallon. Some cases 70 cents. 35 cents is the lowest I've seen. Why? What's behind that? What's the demand? And what does that mean long term? Somebody's getting some subsidy somewhere. We know that the corn farmer traditionally has not. Something's going on that we need to address, because it should be supply and demand, but we got a 35 to 70 cent difference in price per gallon. Why? And who controls that nitrogen? I happen to believe it's the same people. Saudi Arabia has said, we want to control fertilizer to the world, and we want to control energy for the world. And that's the company that's behind so many of these initiatives. And then you have the whole concept of AI. And what bull you're going to use to make your cows better. Well, that's a different kind of AI. Not to be confused with artificial intelligence and artificial insemination and avian influenza. Can we get another AI in the mix here? Do you know how energy intense artificial intelligence is? Did you know that China, who is permitting 2 coal-fired power plants a week, banned artificial intelligence centers and Bitcoin mining in China in 2001 because they said it was too energy intense? We're crippling our reliable, affordable supply of electricity at the same time as we're racing to incentivize AI, Bitcoin, and crypto mining. I've been keeping track of and talking to senators and House members in the South Dakota state legislative session. There's a bunch of senators that want to do nothing other than incentivize artificial intelligence in the state of South Dakota. And you look at the water usage, you look at the electricity usage, it's like, no way should this be happening. And it all comes back to what was mentioned when I was introduced. 30 by 30. How many of you have read Executive Order 14008, signed by Joe Biden, January 27, 2021? 57 pages long. In those 57 pages, 56 of them are devoted to the end of petroleum-based world that we live in. One page, section 6 to be honest, says that by 2030, we will return 30% of the landmass and water back to its natural state. What does that mean? That means no more dams. That means no more irrigation. that means that we want to return it to like an American Serengeti. And you think, well, that can never happen. Have you been to Montana lately? You know what's happening with the APR, American Prairie Reserve, how they're consuming this land. They want to put 450,000 acres contiguous together just to run buffalo on Buffalo Commons, is what they're coming at with us. And it's all part of 30 by 30. But the biggest part of 30 by 30 comes back to where I started this story, which was 1 gallon of diesel fuel replaces 500 man hours of food labor production, and it's the diesel fuel they want to take away. Whoever they are. And the answer that my mother, every day, she listens on the radio, but there's Trent. Do not identify problems without providing solutions. The solution is, well, twofold. Jesus, and the second option is the community coming together. What you've been able to put together for 40 years at Ag Outlook is just the first step. We then need the next step. What do we do to get together? Because we can, all the noise that comes out of Washington, D.C. is just that. We need to pay attention to what's happening in Des Moines, and more importantly, you need to pay attention to what's happening in that courthouse right over there. And there's one other place you've got to pay attention to what's happening. Where's that? Maybe the most important part of your economic future happens at this other building in town. What is it? Well, your home is a good one, yes, but thank you. Who spends more of your money than anybody else? But more than your wife. The school superintendent, who coerces the school board into do the next best thing that they just heard at the state school board convention. Because guess what? Primgard just got a brand new digital scoreboard, and we can't let them have one and not us have one. And if you got a digital scoreboard and does all these fancy things, well, then you got to have a kiosk out front with digital things to get everybody impressed. And how does that improve the kids' test score? And yet nothing impacts your ability to continue to pass that farm on to Eli, 17, more than what's happening at that school board meeting. Nothing Elon Musk or Donald Trump are ever going to do is going to impact your ability more than what's happening at that school board meeting and the county commissioner meeting. And the answer, I'm going to close with this last story. We had a situation in our local school district, 287 students. Loop City High School's got 287 students. We got a $10 million budget this year. That's $30,000 per kid. A couple of years ago, they wanted to knock down the oldest building, which is the best building. You know how they built buildings in the 20s and 30s? To last. Not like the junk they build today. They wanted to knock this building down. It was built in the 20s and 30s, and it's still the storm shelter for the city of Loop City, and put up a $5 million new building for 287 kids. And they're like, no. So we had people show up at the school board meeting. And a school board member, who was the longest term member, he said something that really I thanked him for. And I thanked him at every meeting I went to. Wayne Klein. Wayne Klein said, well, the storm is here now, but it'll pass. They always do. And what he meant by that was, community members, we're riled up now, we're showing up, but we're not going to keep showing up. And so for the next 3 years, I showed up every first Monday of the month, and I'd take advantage of if I had nothing to say in my public comment period in the Open Meetings Law Act, which I had the opportunity to say, I'd stand up and say, the storm is present and accounted for. And that is the answer to every question that I brought up. We continue to allow all of these things to happen because we don't engage in the process. And the second time, the final time, I'm going to say the final thing. We still have the opportunity to fix everything that we know is wrong. But that has only come to us because of two people. Farmers who enable us to continue to feed our nation, and the veterans that for now coming on 250 years have raised their hand and said, I want to be the one that risks my life and goes to protect freedom for future generations. Because at the end of the day, we've had veterans, and we still have active duty men and women through the last 4 years where the morale of the United States military has never been worse. And I meet families whose kid has just signed up to go into the Marines. I'm like, I have no idea why as parents you're in for this, but thank you. Because people love this country. And we take from that the inspiration that if it is to be, it's up to me. And each one of us continue at some way to contribute to maintaining the best world in the nation to call home, the United States of America. And we were given these rights. And at the top of the list was the freedom of speech, right to assemble, the right to be heard. And we simply, we had All-American Beef Battalion feed. We're feeding 300 wounded warriors in Arlington, Texas, September 21st, 2012. I met retired Four-Star General Jimmy Williams, United States Marine Corps. I said, thank you for your service. He looked down on me. He was about 30. He looked down on me and he said,
Son, don't give me.
does that mean I'm done? Son, don't give me lip service. If you really appreciate what it is that these men and women have done for your freedom, then you'll not just talk about it, you'll exercise the rights they have protected for you. That hit me like a bullet between the eyes. We can't just give it lip service. Our actions mean everything. And it's time that we show up and remind people that we do live in the greatest nation, and it came through tremendous toil and sacrifice. And just close with, if it is to be, it's up to me. That's the perfect person qualified to take us to the next generation of greatness. Thank you for 40 years of Ag Outlook. Thank you to the entire community and then the committee that makes it happen, and even Seth, who I like to pick on now. It's about the family that we're a part of, and I look forward to working with you in any way, shape, or form in the future. And I'm all about questions if you are, but it's up to you. Yes, sir.
You started about a deal in North Dakota where it's ethanol plant.
Yes.
Is that just a money thing?
Yes. So the question is, the thing in North Dakota I mentioned where they want to bury CO2 a mile and a half deep under Oliver and Mercer County. They tell you that the CO2 is going there for enhanced oil recovery. But if it goes into that hole, like you're asking me about, in order for them to maintain the $85 per metric ton they're getting paid from the Inflation Reduction Act, it must stay there for 12 years. Ron Ness, executive of North Dakota Petroleum, who's been a longtime friend of mine, who's on the opposite side of this issue of me, he said, Trent, you and I both know that within 12 years, some other new technology will come along for enhanced oil recovery. They're telling people that CO2 will increase the recovery between 15 and 18% in the Bakken. Here's what they're not telling you. The Bakken shale formation will not hold the CO2 at a certain level, and it will not work for enhanced oil recovery. At best, it'll take 50% natural gas, 50% CO2 to increase enhanced oil recovery in the Bakken. And if that was possible, they'd be doing it now. And they're not. So you're absolutely right. It is a money grab. It is $85 per metric ton. And that was not just a Biden thing. The 45Q tax credits, which enable this, came in 2008 under George W. Bush. In 2012, a guy named Barack Obama did some manipulation to that as well. And then in December of 2020, Donald Trump championed the Use It Act, which allowed for CO2 pipelines and CO2 entombment. Well, I don't call it sequestration because what you do on your farm is sequester carbon, and what they're doing is entombing carbon. In 2020, December 28, 2020, Donald Trump signed the Use It Act, which enabled the CO2 pipeline to tap into 45Q tax credits. And then in March of 2021, Joe Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which moved it from $50 per metric ton to $85 per metric ton, which got your Iowa resident who was trying to become a rich fat cat on this by the name of Bruce Grastetter to invest as much as he possibly could in other people's money to tap into that 45Q tax credit of $85 per metric ton. And nobody gets paid, it's just a tax credit. So who needs tax credits? Well, people like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Steve Bezos, they need tax credits. So it is a major shift of wealth from people who are producing something to people who don't produce anything. Does that answer your question? Other questions? Comments? Criticisms? I'm open to anything. Go ahead, Cole. You're live on the Drive at 5 with Trent. Nothing else?
We're SPP, so you should have slept some.
Oh, so that's why I feel better. So MISO goes to Wisconsin, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and down through Illinois and in Louisiana. Excellent. Rest assured, your Southwest powerful. Thanks, guys.